Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 30th Emerging Growth Conference. I'm Anna Berry. I'll be your host today. As always, we have an exciting list of companies in a wide range of growth sectors presenting to you today. Remember, all of our conferences are uploaded to our YouTube channel, so subscribe so you can see them individually. It's youtube.com/Emerging Growth Conference. Just a few notes for those attending. We'll be running till about 2:30 p.m. Eastern time today. And remember, when we switch to the next company, you're going to see a black screen for a moment. Don't go anywhere. It's just us moving over. But if you do experience downtime for more than a minute or two, refresh your browser and everything will work fine. Our platform does work best on Google Chrome. So if you're watching from an Apple device, you have to hit the play button to start the session. During each company's presentation, you can submit questions through the webcast module, and the presenters will attempt to address as many of these at the end of their presentation. One last note, after today's event, you'll be redirected to the registration page for the next conference, so stay on or come back to reserve your spot early. Today, we have 10 companies presenting. So without further ado, I'll introduce our first. We have URE Energy, or UR Energy. On the New York Stock Exchange, it's URG, and the TSX, it's URE. It's a uranium mining company operating the Lost Creek in-situ recovery uranium facility in south central Wyoming, and has produced, packaged, and shipped more than 2.6 million pounds since commencement. Please welcome its CEO, John Cash. Welcome, John. How are you doing today?
Doing great. And thanks for having me back on. Really appreciate the opportunity. And it's an exciting time to be talking about the nuclear space.
Yes, it is. All right, John, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I'll go directly to the slides. And I always like to start off with a picture of our operating Lost Creek mine. It's been in operations for 8 years now, and our guys are very proud of that. And let's see here. The obligatory disclaimer. I might make some forward-looking statements, especially with regard to some of our R&D projects, so please be aware of that. So we have two flagship properties that we are working on right now. The first, again, is Lost Creek. The mine has been up and running for over 8 years now. And there's a photograph on the top of the slide showing it out in the plains of Wyoming. We've produced over 2.7 million pounds of uranium since beginning operations, and it's continuing to operate today. It's up and running, it's staffed right now, and the water is flowing, and we are making pounds. We have allowed production to decline over the last 3 years in respect of market conditions, but we are continuing to produce. But in the fall of last year, we saw the price of uranium begin to climb, and we decided at that point we needed to be more ready to ramp up production to fill into contracts when we're able to sign into those. So we started a drilling program, we started a construction program, and that's been ongoing since fall of last year. The drilling program, we expect to conclude it next month. We'll have our next header house ready to go and turn on at that point. And we'll continue to build out the header house, and that will be done over the summertime, and that will allow us to ramp up production more quickly. Lost Creek has been a prolific producer. It has a great resource in the ground. We still have 11.9 million pounds of measured and indicated resource, in addition to 6.6 million pounds of inferred resource that we can pursue. If we return to operations, when we return to operations and fill contracts, we'll return to very low cost production. Back in 2015, when we were producing nearly 800,000 pounds per year, our cash cost was about $16 a pound, and that's outstanding. And our most recent modeling shows that we will be able to return to that very similar cost going forward. So at Lost Creek, not only do we have the mine units within Lost Creek proper, but we are expanding that area through additional permitting into an area called LC East in the KM area. We are required to get 3 major permits to be able to do that. We already have 2 of the 3 major permits in hand. We are working and finalizing the 3rd final permit, and we expect that that will be done this year. And that will allow us to expand beyond the existing areas out into additional mine units. But to be clear, we are fully permitted right now to operate Lost Creek. We have well over 4 million pounds in the ground that are fully permitted that we can begin to address immediately at a production rate of about 1 million pounds per year. Our second flagship property is Shirley Basin. It's also in Wyoming and is also an ISR facility. It has all 3 of the major permits required, so we can go in and start construction on that whenever we wish to do so. But when we bring Shirley Basin up and start it running, that will effectively double our production, because Lost Creek, our mine there, can produce 1.2 million pounds per year. That's its licensed capacity. Shirley Basin is licensed at 1 million pounds per year. So that gives us a mine capacity of 2.2 million pounds per year. Shirley Basin is a brownfield project. It's been a conventional mine. It's also been a historic in situ mine as well. In fact, we believe it was probably the first in situ mine in the world on a commercial scale. They produced over 1 million pounds starting back in 1963. So we're excited to bring in situ back to its birthplace. But since it's a brownfield project, a lot of the infrastructure is already in place. The ore body is drilled out. We don't need to do any more exploration or delineation. We know where all of the mineralization is at. We have all of the historic records. The ore body is also relatively shallow, and that will actually allow us to recover the mineral at a slightly lower cost than even at Lost Creek. Throughout the history of the company, we have been able to sell a lot of pounds into contracts, 2.4 million pounds of our production from Lost Creek. In addition to that, we've gone out into the market and purchased 1.8 million pounds and sold those into contracts as well. I'll talk more about our finances a little bit later on, but I will point out that we've got a great inventory, 284,000 pounds of inventory that we can sell into the spot market. The spot market has been very volatile. Typically, it's been over $55 a pound lately. It's dipped a little bit below that right now. We're right at 53, but that's going to be a great source of income for us whenever we decide to sell that material. So there are 3 market movers right now in our space, or 3 catalysts that we're keeping a very close eye on. And I'd like to talk about all 3 of those briefly. The first is the world is beginning to recognize that nuclear has got to be a part of any green energy story, any decarbonization story, certainly any serious conversation. And already nuclear is very popular globally and is growing in popularity. The US, we already get 20% of our electric from nuclear power plants. Worldwide, it's about 10%. There are 440 operable reactors and 55 in construction, 100 reactors on order and 300 proposed. But really, the bottom line is, what does that mean for demand? Well, the World Nuclear Association, which is a trade association, they are projecting annual growth about 4.2% through 2040. That's their reference case. And their upper case, they're projecting 7.9% in annual growth in demand through 2040. Even their lowercase projection is all positive. So you can see that we're looking at tremendous growth going forward within the industry, not only for electric generation, but now they are looking at nuclear power as a source of clean, green hydrogen production. And there are companies globally that are taking meaningful steps toward that. The crypto miners have been criticized pretty heavily for the amount of energy they use that is from carbon sources. And so they are trying to move toward cleaner renewables and nuclear to be able to do the Bitcoin mining and mining of other types of currency. Electric vehicles, they also understand that if you're going to have an EV vehicle, it doesn't make any sense to charge it with coal-fired. That is counterproductive. And so there's a strong desire within the industry to move toward cleaner energy. Finally, SMRs, small modular reactors. These are becoming increasingly popular, and there are a number of countries out there that are working on designs and construction, 11 countries, and they're already operating in 3 countries. Even here in Wyoming, where I'm sitting here today, Bill Gates has decided to build out his first small modular reactor, the Natrium, in the western part of our state, and we're excited to see that come into Wyoming and being brought up into production. Looks like that it will be about 8 to 10 years before that's up and running, but meaningful steps are being taken to advance SMRs. So not just in the US, but globally, there is an increasing acceptance of nuclear power. China really is the gorilla in the room. Last year, they announced that they would be building out 115 reactors in the next 15 years, so 10 per year. Immense growth that we're seeing out of China. Last week, they said that they are on track to reach that goal of 115 reactors. And so if anybody can do it, they can do it. But that's going to introduce a lot of demand into the industry. But not just China, a number of other countries. The UK is pushing for carbon free. In fact, they made comments this week about the plant that they're building, that it's a go, and they're making a big bet on nuclear. South Korea just elected a new president who is strongly pro-nuclear, and they had plans to phase out nuclear over several decades. He is reversing that policy, and in fact is saying, not only are we going to reverse that, we're going to build new reactors, and we are going to begin to export technology to build out reactors globally. And so they are beginning to bid on reactor bids throughout the world. France, of course, has got a great history of nuclear power. President Macron was just reelected, and he is seeking a life extension for most of the French reactors. And he's also proposed to build out 6 to 14 new reactors. And it's not just in these countries, it's all over the world. And I've got a short list there of other countries that are looking to increase nuclear power. In the US, there's a lot going on in this space. There's been a lot of legislation that's been passed, including the US Uranium Reserve under the Trump administration. That was a bipartisan law that allocated $75 million to the front end of the nuclear fuel cycle. The Department of Energy is working on setting up that program right now, but it will be designed to buy uranium from domestic miners and put that into a reserve in case there is ever a supply disruption. Keep in mind, that law was passed well before Russia invaded Ukraine. So there was a little bit of foresight there to be able to establish that program. Also, the Civil Nuclear Credit Program has been passed into law. And just last week, the Department of Energy announced guidelines for how to apply for those funds. But it includes $6 billion with the intent of extending the life of existing reactors in the US. There is a preference in the law to spend money with utilities that are buying domestic material. So it's our goal to be able to benefit from that legislation, but also from the US Uranium Reserve legislation and the funding that's available there. In addition to the federal government and the legislation that they've passed, there are several states that have passed laws in the last 18 months or so to promote nuclear energy within their respective states. So there is also a lot of pending legislation that we should talk about. First off is the Russia uranium ban that's got Senate and House versions ongoing and in a bipartisan way. That was advanced by Senator Barrasso, a Republican from the state of Wyoming. In addition to that, there is the No Russia Act of 2022. Again, that's a Barrasso bill, and that would ban imports of Russian material into the U.S. market, and it would support domestic production. Beyond that, moving from a Republican-supported set of legislation to a Democrat-supported, Senator Manchin has proposed the International Nuclear Energy Act. And that would essentially establish a department, an executive level branch within the government to support the global advancement of nuclear energy and help establish U.S. prominence in that. But that's got bipartisan support as well. It includes a provision that would stop imports of Russian material into the U.S. in 2025. So while all of that's going on, that legislation, that increasing support due to green energy, the price of uranium began to increase. It began to improve. And when the financial players saw that, they said, hey, we've got to be involved in that. In the long run, there's a lot of potential here. So the financial players started jumping in. And you got hedge funds like MMCap and Anchorage jumping in, buying physical material. ETFs like North Shore, which was just acquired by Sprott, and Global X were jumping in. Even a lot of the large uranium producers who could not produce material at a cost lower than the spot price, they were actually out buying material out of the market instead of producing it. So that was putting pressure on the market as well. But the real game changer, what really started to increase the price of uranium, was when the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust was established in July of last year. What Sprott has done is developed this trust so that they go out in the market via an ATM. They get financing that way. They take those funds then and they actually buy physical uranium and they hold it in this trust. This is a one-way or closed trust. So they acquire pounds, but they don't sell them. They have no mechanism to sell them back into the market. So it is a buy and hold strategy that they've developed. But they are buying a lot of pounds in the market, 55 million pounds to date, and it's growing. And they are essentially mopping up anything that's not nailed down out there, they are acquiring. So after that happened, Kazakhstan said, hey, we're going to develop something similar. And they put together their own physical uranium fund. And they've said that they're going to fund that at the tune of about $500 million to be able to purchase material and to fill that. So the third item that is really driving prices right now, and most recently, is geopolitical risk. And it's the tail that's wagging the dog right now. When Russia invaded Ukraine, that introduced a lot of uncertainty into the supply market because Russia is a very large supplier, not just to the US, where they fill 20% of our demand, but globally. They are a massive supplier of enriched uranium product. So far, that material continues to flow into the US. There are no sanctions on it. But as I mentioned earlier, there are at least 3 pieces of legislation on the Capitol Hill right now that would consider sanctioning that material so that it could not come into the US anymore. And we always have to remember, too, this is a two-way street. It's not just about whether we sanction them. Russia could also cut that supply off to the US if they so desired. So it's a tit for tat. It could go either way, but that supply is tenuous. More important than that is Kazakhstan. They supply about 46% of uranium globally. They are the big mining nation when it comes to uranium. And it's very clear that Russia has tremendous influence over Kazakhstan. To prove that, all we need to do is look back at what happened in January when Russian troops went in and shut down protests rather violently, killed about 200 people. So Russia has tremendous influence in Kazakhstan. They have direct ownership, large ownership percentages in 4 of the 11 uranium mines in Kazakhstan. And Russia is also the route that uranium goes through. Once it leaves Kazakhstan, goes through Russia to the port at St. Petersburg for shipping. So Russia has a lot of influence over that material, not just through production, but geopolitically, but also logistics of shipping that material out of the country. Kazakhstan is aware of the logistics issues, and they are taking active steps to find other routes. And there are a couple of other routes, but they are pretty poor routes compared to going through Russia. Uzbekistan is a similar situation to Kazakhstan. Although they're not nearly as large a producer as Kazakhstan, they still are a significant producer, and they are heavily influenced by Russia. So while all of this is going on and there's potential for supply disruption for these geopolitical reasons, we have to keep in mind that there is a limited supply globally from other countries. We can look at Africa, which historically has been a big producer of uranium, but it is largely controlled by China. And so a lot of those pounds are not coming east or west, they're going east. Canada is also historically a big producer. There are 2 big mines there, but they have limited capacity to backfill any supply disruptions. While all of this is going on, there is very little production in the US, as demonstrated by this chart produced by the US government. You can see the last few years, production has been so low in the US that it's not even being recorded. But that's where our company comes in. That's where URE Energy comes in with its Lost Creek property. We have a great resource in the ground, 11.9 million pounds of M&I, another 6.6 million pounds in the inferred category, a great history of production, and a fantastic recovery rate. We've proven that we can put pounds in the can very cost effectively. We also have great areas out there to continue to explore. In that map up there in the top left, you see we've got 35,000 acres to play on and a lot of opportunity to explore and find more pounds. Our production to date has been very low cost. And I'll just draw your attention to the year 2015. If you look down toward the bottom, you can see our average cash cost was $16.27 a pound. We believe we can get back in that neighborhood, even in spite of inflation, when we're able to ramp up and fill into contracts. Shirley Basin also is our second flagship. Again, great quality resource, shallow, it's drilled out. We believe our cost of production there will be even a little bit less at about $15.86 a pound. So what's going on right now? To be able to ramp up more quickly, we've instituted the drilling and construction program. That's going to allow us to ramp up production when that program is complete, ramp up production within about 6 months to get up to a 1 million pound a year run rate at Lost Creek. We've been doing advanced purchasing of material to make sure that we don't run into any supply hiccups. We're very aware of cost and supply delays, and we're working our way through those and being proactive to avoid any problems. We've been able to retain our key staff at the site so that when we do ramp up, we have experienced people on site. And we're also looking at ways to reduce costs, and I'll be talking about that again just a little bit later. We are leading the green revolution in nuclear power. If you take a look at the energy that will be produced from the product from Lost Creek and Shirley Basin, and you compare that to the same energy produced from a coal-fired power plant, we're going to be taking about 312 million metric tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere. And that's equivalent to taking about 67 million cars off of the road. We're taking other actions as well to reduce our footprint. We're building an office here in town, a construction facility in town, so that some of our employees can work in town instead of driving out to the mine site. We are using the in-situ mining technique, which has minimal footprint. And we're also working very diligently on recycling water. And I'll talk some more about that in the next slide as well. But we've made great strides, and we hope to continue to make more dramatic improvements. But URE Energy has been a leader in ISR technology and permitting, and the two go hand in hand in an industry like this that's regulated so heavily. The technology and the permitting, the regulatory affairs, they go in lockstep with each other. So some of the successes we've had to date, we've redesigned ion exchange vessels so that we don't have to go in and maintain them like other companies do. We've developed a Class 5 water treatment and disposal system that dramatically reduced our water consumption. We've made some advancements in well abandonment methods, and also on the regulatory front, developing methods for aquifer exemptions with the EPA. And those methods now are used across the industry. So ongoing, we have several R&D projects. I'll just talk about 2 of those right now, but we have others. The first is well casing and installation. Last fall, when we began our drilling program, we quickly realized that materials were in short supply and we needed to come up with different casing. And we were able to do that and engineer those, and we've applied for a patent, a provisional patent for that methodology and that material. We are working through permitting on that right now and expect that to be done in the coming weeks. But I want to be careful to point out, this is not a proven technology yet. We still need to go out in the field and work on this in the field. But if we're able to get that to work, we believe we'll be able to significantly reduce our rig time out in the field. We are also making advances with water treatment and filtration. Our goal is to have a further additional 90% reduction in wastewater generation. And we are working diligently on that now. And we'll be having more to report on that, we hope, late this year. During the conference, I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of speakers talk about how experienced their management is, their qualifications. They've worked at a lot of different places. They know what they're doing. And I'm going to say the same thing. But I'll try to provide some numeric evidence to support that. And that's the dilution chart. And this chart shows us on the left, our dilution to our shareholders compared to our U.S. competitors. And you can see that we run a tight ship. We're very careful with our capital, and we know it's precious, and so we treat it that way. Our market position, 217 million shares outstanding. Market cap is moving quite a bit. The price of uranium has been very volatile, but it's been around 400 million to about 300 million the last couple of weeks. Our cash position is strong. We have over $44 million in cash. In addition to that, we have that great inventory that we've produced and ready to sell, and we can convert that into cash very quickly. We are on the Russell Index, and we have great coverage of our space. So our takeaways, we've got a great solid runway through 22, great cash, great inventory to be able to sell. We are working on putting ourselves in an even stronger position to be able to ramp up production very quickly when we're able to sell into contracts. So we got the drill rigs out there and doing construction on the next header house. With that funding we have in place, we think going forward any additional dilution to our shareholders will be minimal because we'll be able to do most everything we need to do with that cash we have on hand and also with the inventory and selling that. So with that, I'll conclude. Here's the slide with all of our contact information. Would love to hear from you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And we love talking about the mine, so don't hesitate to call.
Great. Thank you so much, John. Lots of questions for you. Angie Martin Oro asks, just to get more color on how long-term contracts would work for your financial statements. Let's say you get a couple of contracts with utilities this year. When would you get the revenues and cash from those contracts?
So we get paid for those contracts upon delivery, within 30 days of delivery. So typically a long-term contract doesn't start immediately. It typically would take 6 months to a year to begin to feed into that. So we would expect revenues in about a year, maybe 18 months on the outside to be able to make deliveries and get payment for those.
Okay, great. Austin M. says the research and development projects sound intriguing. Can you provide more detail on when you'll be able to disclose more information?
So we have several projects ongoing. I just spoke about 2 of them. The casing matter, where we're looking at different installation technologies, that's in the permitting stage right now. In fact, the Land Quality Division of the state of Wyoming has been reviewing that for about a month now. We expect to hear back from them within a few weeks. At that point, we will go out and pretty much immediately begin to test that in the field. So I would say in about 3 months, maybe 4 months, if I'm a little pessimistic, we should be able to have some news on that, but it largely hinges on how quickly the regulators get that review done. But it is considered an NSR, a non-significant revision to the permit, so it shouldn't take them very long to get through that. The advanced water treatment, we are making some strides on that, working through engineering right now, and we should be able to report back to you on that in the 4th quarter of this year.
Great, thank you for that. Ron Becker asks, is there any additional permitting required to ramp up production at Lost Creek or Shirley Basin?
So no, both projects are fully permitted, Lost Creek and Shirley Basin. Lost Creek is in production today, and we have several million pounds more that are fully permitted. So several more years of production there, even before we look at moving into LC East and the KM amendment areas. Shirley Basin is fully permitted. We have all 3 of the major permits. So that facility is not constructed yet, but we can go out and begin construction on that very quickly once we get the signal to go. The only area that is not permitted is the LC East area, and that's where we have 2 of the 3 major permits, and we're working on finalizing that last permit and should have that put to bed this year.
Great. Paul Webb asks, how soon after completion of Lost Creek 2 will it begin production, and what will that do to your sales on a percentage basis?
So at Lost Creek, again, it's already in production. We can ramp it up to a 1 million pound a year run rate with no additional permitting. In about 6 months, 7 months, we should be able to ramp that up to the 1 million pound a year run rate. With the additional areas that we're permitting, that will not increase the capacity. The capacity will stay the same. It will just give us additional areas to be able to move into. So that capacity at Lost Creek, it'll stay at 1.2 million pounds, and we'll just continue to move through the mine units and migrate into LC East as we move through the ore body.
Thank you for that. Will Cunningham asks, he says, I see you're taking advanced measures to hedge the supply chain issues. What will this do to your production costs? Do you see a big increase?
There is an increase. Inflation is absolutely real. Since we are a producing mine, we are out there buying pumps, pipe, material, so we know to the penny what everything costs, and it is real. In the in-situ industry, we use a lot of plastic piping, which of course is derived from oil. And so we are directly subject to those prices from oil. And will it increase prices? Yeah, absolutely it will. We produced a technical report and attached it to our annual report just a couple of months ago, and it details what the cost of production are going to be. We have attempted to do our very best to integrate inflation into that and what we had seen to date. But going forward, if there is additional inflation, which almost certainly there will be, it does affect our prices of material and will affect the cost of production. So yeah, we are very aware of that. But as far as getting supplies in and making sure we have what we need, we've instituted a program to make sure we have all of the parts we need. For Header House 2.4, we already have everything we need there. Pumps maybe is the one exception, and we should have those within a week or two. Header House 2.5, the next header house, everything is ordered. And even for the header house beyond that, Header House 2.6, everything that has been determined to be long lead has already been ordered and is on its way. So we're well aware of those issues and trying to stay ahead of them.
Great. John, real quick, Ed Fowler wants to know, who's your greatest competition in the space?
Globally, Kazatomprom. They are the biggest gorilla in the room by far and away. And it's going to be very important to watch them in the coming weeks and months to see if there's any supply disruption from them because of geopolitics. It's impossible to predict what's going to happen there, but I can tell you that everyone's kind of on the edge of their seats waiting to see what's going to happen.
Right, we all are. Well, thrilling stuff that you guys are doing over there. Thank you so much for your time and this great presentation. Please join us again in the future with some updates.
All right, thank you.
All right, everyone, stay with us. We're transitioning to our next presenter. We'll be right back.